For Duke Halloran, mining isn't just a job. It's his life's work. Over the decades, he's built a multi-million-dollar empire on the unforgiving ground of the Yukon backcountry. But this time, things were slipping fast out of his control. A mistake by two brand-new drivers put a machine worth nearly $1 million in the mud, fighting for its life. This wasn't some small piece of kit. It was a heavy excavator that pulled 300 to 400 cubic yards of pay dirt out of the ground every single day, machinery that quietly kept an entire operation breathing. One day of downtime on that machine meant real money disappearing, thousands of dollars gone before lunch. The accident happened in seconds. The machine lost its footing, the track slipped, and the whole weight of it leaned hard to one side. Had it gone all the way over, it wouldn't have just been a wrecked excavator. It could have cost someone standing nearby their life. Panic spread across the site fast. Radios crackled nonstop, the crew scrambled in every direction, and the machine sat there in the middle of it all, sinking a little deeper with every passing second. In this world, an accident like that isn't just a repair bill. It threatens to take the whole operation down with it. Fuel kept burning. The crew stood idle. And every hour the machine sat dead in the mud added another layer to the loss. Duke was furious the moment word reached him. He knew right away this wasn't some rookie hiccup. This was a real, serious risk that never should have been allowed near that machine. When he got to the site, what he found looked like the aftermath of a disaster. A machine buried in mud, parts bent out of shape, and a crew standing around looking like they'd seen a ghost. For Duke, this wasn't just about one broken excavator. It exposed a crack running straight through his whole system. Will this mistake sink the entire season, or will Duke find a way to claw it back? Stick around, because this story is only getting started. That morning had started like any other. The machines were humming along at their usual pace, the crew moving through the motions of another long shift. Then, without warning, everything changed in an instant. The excavator, a machine worth close to $1 million, suddenly pitched out of control. First came a small jolt, barely noticeable. Then the track slipped, and in a heartbeat the whole machine went unstable. What had been a quiet, ordinary morning turned into chaos in the space of a breath. Voices cut through the radio static, sharp and urgent. "Stop! Stop! She's slipping. We've lost her." Crew members took off running, some pulling back to a safe distance, others rushing forward, trying to figure out what could be done. Everyone on that site understood in an instant that this wasn't some minor issue, because that excavator was the machine pulling 300 to 400 yards of dirt a day. It was the backbone the whole operation leaned on. If it went down completely, this wouldn't just be a damaged machine. It could stall the entire production line. Slowly, the excavator kept tilting, its arms sinking deeper into the earth, the grip of its tracks giving way bit by bit. It looked like it might roll over completely at any second. And if it had, the damage wouldn't have stopped at dollars and cents. Anyone standing too close could have been hurt, or worse. The tension on that ground was thick enough to choke on, every second stretching out far longer than it should have. One of the senior hands shouted for everyone to clear back, warning that it could go over any moment. But nobody could tear their eyes away, because they all understood exactly what was riding on that one machine. In the space of a few careless moments, a small mistake had pushed the entire operation to the edge of disaster. The only question left hanging in the air was whether that excavator would come back from this, or whether this accident would turn into the worst setback of the whole season. When people hear that a machine broke down, it sounds like nothing more than a technical hiccup. But out here, in this line of work, a machine like that isn't just steel and hydraulics. It's the heartbeat of the entire operation. This particular excavator was worth close to $1 million, but the real story was never the price tag. It was what that machine earned every single day was running. It was the piece of equipment responsible for pulling 300 to 400 cubic yards of pay dirt daily, the raw ground that everything else in the operation depended on. If that machine sat idle for even one day, the whole chain behind it ground to a halt. The wash plant would sit empty. Trucks would have nothing to haul. The crew would be standing around with nothing to do but wait. That kind of stoppage translated into a real, painful loss every single day it dragged on. And it wasn't only about moving dirt. That same excavator, indirectly, was tied to a meaningful share of the gold recovered on any given day. Multiply that out against current gold prices, and you start to understand why Duke treated that machine like it was worth more than its price tag suggested. It wasn't just a piece of iron sitting on his lot. It was central to his whole strategy, the thing his confidence in the season was built around. So when that machine ended up half-buried and tilting in the mud, it wasn't just one asset in trouble. The entire operation felt the tremor. And that's exactly why the panic on site that day ran so deep. It wasn't only the fear of losing a machine. It was the fear that losing it could put the whole season in jeopardy. In any large mining operation, the machines are only as reliable as the people running them. And that's exactly where the real story behind this accident begins. The season was hitting its stride, production targets were ambitious, and every day lost meant real money slipping away. Under that kind of pressure, the crew brought on a couple of new drivers in a hurry. On paper, they had some basic experience, but neither of them had spent real time on ground as unpredictable as this. The mistake wasn't just hiring them. It was throwing them straight into the field without giving them time to actually learn the terrain first. Some of the senior operators weren't fully comfortable with that decision from the start. A few of them had flagged it directly, pointing out that this ground doesn't forgive careless moves, that one wrong angle or one ignored warning sign about the ground beneath the tracks could put $1 million machine in danger within seconds. But the pressure to keep production moving was strong enough that those warnings got brushed aside. The new drivers figured it was straightforward work. Fire up the machine, move the dirt, job done. What they didn't fully grasp was that they weren't just running a piece of equipment. They were holding the operation's backbone in their hands. Small mistakes started creeping in quietly at first. A little misalignment here, uneven digging there, a load that wasn't balanced quite right. None of it looked like a big deal in the moment. But the real danger in this line of work is never the mistake itself. It's how long it goes unnoticed. One of the senior crew members admitted afterward that they'd sensed something was off almost right away. But by the time anyone acted, the chain of events was already moving too fast to stop. The season was in full swing, everyone pushing hard to keep production climbing, when the moment came that shook the whole site. One of the new drivers, still finding his footing on the machine, guided the excavator onto a patch of ground that looked solid on the surface, but was soft and unstable underneath. It was exactly the kind of spot the experienced hands always treated with caution, because losing your balance there could send a machine sliding without warning. In the rush of the day, that basic caution got overlooked. The driver set the machine at the wrong angle, and almost as soon as digging began, he loaded weight unevenly onto one side. For a moment, everything looked fine. Then, within seconds, it wasn't. As the bucket filled, the machine's full weight shifted hard to one side. The tracks lost their grip, and the soft ground underneath gave out from under them. The excavator began to tilt, slowly at first, and then faster, and that's when the panic set in for real. Someone nearby shouted for him to stop, that the angle was wrong, but it was already too late. The center of gravity had shifted too far. The driver tried to correct it, but every adjustment he made only made things worse. Within moments, that $1 million machine sat half-tipped, looking like one more shift in weight would send it over completely. This wasn't just some freak accident. It was the direct result of inexperience meeting unforgiving ground. If the terrain had been checked properly first, if the angle had been right, if the load had gone in evenly, none of this would have happened. But out here, there's no room for should-haves. Even one small oversight can set off a chain reaction nobody can stop once it's moving. In that moment, the whole site seemed to freeze, every eye locked on a machine that kept sinking deeper with each passing second. Nobody wanted to get close, because if it went all the way over, the danger wouldn't stop at the equipment. That was the moment everyone understood this wasn't a small mistake anymore. This was something that could define the rest of the season. The accident itself unfolded almost too fast to process. As the load kept building, the track gave way completely, throwing off what little balance remained. First came a jolt, then the whole body of the machine slid sideways. The soft ground lost its grip entirely, and the excavator began sinking in earnest. "Stop! Stop! She's going!" Someone screamed over the radio, and the crew scattered, some pulling back to safety, others frozen in place, watching in disbelief that a machine this massive could end up so helpless so fast. The engine kept running, the hydraulic arms still pressing into the dirt, the tracks swaying uselessly in the air, almost like the machine itself was fighting to right itself. Within seconds it settled into a half-tilted position, one side buried, the other hanging exposed. Had it gone all the way over, the cost wouldn't have stopped at dollars. Anyone caught nearby could have been seriously hurt. The tension on site was suffocating, everyone holding their breath, watching to see what would happen next. A senior hand barked for everyone to fall back further, warning it could still go at any moment. For a stretch of time that felt endless, nobody moved. Nobody dared get closer. Everyone was just waiting to see whether the machine would settle or whether the next few seconds would turn this into the worst disaster of the entire season. The first real consequence of the accident was immediate. The moment that excavator sank into its half-buried position, the entire operation stalled. That machine wasn't just one piece of equipment. It was the backbone the whole system leaned on. With it down, trucks had nothing to haul, the wash plants sat empty, and the rest of the crew found themselves standing around with nothing productive to do. The clock started ticking the second work stopped, and every hour of downtime chipped away at the day's earnings. But the real cost ran deeper than the hourly math. Fuel kept burning, generators kept running, and the crew kept drawing pay while producing nothing at all. Expenses didn't pause just because production had. If that downtime had stretched from a few hours into a full day, the losses would have piled up fast. Worse, the production chain itself was broken. No dirt moving meant no gold coming out of the ground, not for as long as that machine sat there useless in the mud. One of the senior crew members said quietly that this wasn't just a delay, that money like this doesn't come back once it's lost. The whole feel of the site had shifted. Where there had been the steady rhythm of machinery and work only a short while earlier, now there was just silence and tension. Every eye kept drifting back to that stuck excavator because until it was moving again, nothing else on that site was moving either. For Duke, this was the hardest part to swallow, knowing the whole mess had come from one accident that never should have happened in the first place. That's the reality of this business. Every minute matters, and that day, minute after minute, real money was disappearing into the mud. When word of the accident reached Duke, his reaction was immediate. Anger, plain and simple. Not just over one damaged machine, but over the carelessness that had put his whole operation at risk. This wasn't a small thing to him. He'd spent decades building this business on hard ground, where every call made came down to experience and precision. And now, on his own site, a machine worth close to $1 million had nearly been wrecked because of a handful of careless seconds. When he pulled up to the scene, the tension only thickened. The crew was already on edge, and Duke's presence made it heavier still. He stood there for a long moment, just staring at the half-sunk machine without saying a word, taking in the tracks buried in mud, the bent metal, the shaken crew standing around, not knowing what to say. Then he turned to the two new drivers, and his voice, when it came, was hard and direct. He wanted to know if they'd checked the ground first, why the angle had been wrong, whether they understood exactly what kind of machine they'd been trusted to run. This wasn't just a dressing down. It was a reckoning. Duke understood plainly that this hadn't been some freak technical failure. It came down to inexperience and bad judgment, plain and simple. He told them straight that this wasn't a practice yard, that this was a multi-million-dollar operation where one careless mistake could cost real money and, worse, someone's safety. The crew stood in silence, because everyone there understood the mistake could have been avoided. But now the damage was done, and there was no undoing it. For Duke, this wasn't only about one machine. It raised a harder question about whether he could trust the people around him to run the equipment he depended on. If drivers like that stayed on without real oversight, another accident, maybe a worse one, felt inevitable. He made it clear, in no uncertain terms, that if someone couldn't handle the responsibility, they didn't belong on that site. Everyone standing there understood in that moment this wasn't just anger. It was a warning that things were about to get a lot stricter.